compared to that, we're in pretty good shape. I want to give you Joe Scarry to talk about some of the ideas we have for breakout groups and to have a little bit of a discussion on where the energy is around that.
Thanks, everyone. I'm so glad everyone's here this morning, and thanks for coming out so early. I want to give you a little bit of context for the network work that's gone on so far, and that will set the stage for what we were imagining could happen today. And I'm going to jump right into the middle with the planning that went on for the April Days of Action. How many people participated in some way in what was called the April Days of Action this past year? So great. A lot of people here. And the history of that is that on December 15th of this past year, a group of people got together in New York City and said, we know that there's going to be a lot of demonstration and protests happening in the spring. How can we give it some shape and coordinate in some way? And so several things happened. One was there was a notion that there were several main threads of work there. One was protests at drone bases. One was protests against manufacturers. One was protests at universities and research institutions. So I'll start by saying that one of the things we're going to propose today is that we have several breakout groups and that follow that pattern. So folks who are really focusing on work at bases, we would encourage you to get together and talk and share information. Similarly with manufacturers, similarly with universities and research institutions. In the time between December of this past year and April, we convened a lot of conference calls around the country. And one of the ways that we did it was on a geographic basis. So we had all the folks from the Northwest on a call, we had all the folks from California, all the folks from Illinois and Indiana, etc. And that was really helpful because it was often the first time that people who were in the same region or even in the same state had talked together. And so I'm hoping that as I'm saying this, I'm planting some seeds with you about some of the things that you would like to do in the days going forward. Because we did some of the work to coordinate those conference calls, but hey, you know, everyone's got telephones, everybody can use free conference call, you can make these things happen. One of the other things that we did was to have conference calls around some of the topical areas. So in other words, some of the people who are doing work on bases got together and had calls together. I remember specifically folks from Hancock being on the same call with people who are doing the protests against Beale out in San Francisco. They had a lot to share together. So those are some of the ways that we've tried to plant the seeds for the network over the last year. In terms of some tools to put in place, in the time since the CodePaint conference in the spring of 2012, we put up about 25 different little websites for the state level work, with the theory that any protest that's going on should be visible on the web in a persistent form. That is, when a protest happens, it's not a one-day thing. There's a long period leading up to it, and the whole world can know about it. There's eternity afterwards, and the whole world knows about it. So if somebody goes on Google and they say, you know, hey, I'm from Wisconsin, this drones thing seems to be a bad deal. You know, what's going on in Wisconsin? And, you know, they Google it. They should just bring up the work that's going on in Wisconsin, right? So here's Joy First and Bonnie Block and the whole crowd in Wisconsin. Many of you have very elaborate sites already. Many of you are just getting started with this. We can help each other. I'll just say one other thing, which is that we met in May in Philadelphia to, again, come up with some ideas about how to spur this forward. And a lot of great ideas came out of that. A lot of people who are working on surveillance were wrapped into that at that time, so Bill of Rights Defense Committee, et cetera. We have one really cool idea, which is somebody said, let's have a wiki. And that way, not just a few people, but everybody in the network, in fact, everybody in the world can collaborate of people. Alicia Godsberg from East Action, New York State, a lot of you know her. She said, let's do a wiki. And Noor, Code Pink said, let's start with an organizer manual. Let's have a manual that anybody who wants to do anti-drone organizing can access. And instead of putting it in a 3-ring binder and handing it out at a conference in DC, let's just put it online, because that's the way people work these days. So people have been adding information